One of the words you said there, I think, encapsulates pretty much the whole film. The whole 3 hours, 20 odd-ish minutes running time, and that is audacious. I think I felt it was a bit too long. I thought there's maybe trimmed down on some of the sequences. If they could get to like 2 hours and 30 with this, still telling the same story, I think we could have a really super engaging film overall.
I was going to say, all of those slow motion sequences, given that there were quite a lot of them, I think probably elongated the movie by about 30 minutes probably.
More real time. Hey everybody, joining Flixwatcher today we have John.
Hello there.
Nicola.
Hello.
And Kobe.
Hey.
And we're here to talk about RRR. Thank you as always to the mighty people for the mighty, mighty tunes. And thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
at FlixWatcherPod and on Instagram
at FlixWatcher. Hello film fans, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher Podcast. Our guests today are John and Nicola. Over to you please, Nicola, to tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
Hello, well, by day I am a writer, researcher and presenter and a former futurologist as well. Before you ask, I do have a crystal ball. Sadly, I saw no future in it. So yeah, I don't use a crystal ball. That would be boring if I did that all day. I don't have a podcast. Everybody else has. I haven't got one. I tend to be a bit of a pod tart. I go on other people's and I usually talk about worky stuff. So it's normally things about the future of work and customer experience. But that's what I do by day. By night, I spend most of my time in darkened rooms, usually at the cinema, to be honest, but I do spend a lot of time at the theatre as well, and the occasional gig. So yeah, I mean, that's me.
Gigs. Not been to one of those before since the before times.
What?
Oh wow, really? Oh, I went last week.
It was a good one.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I've been to so many. And so many that I forgot I booked, and then they went send you emails going like, you may have booked this ticket a while ago, but you're going to see Elton John next week. Have you remembered?
No.
It's been like that for like the past year, where the gigs have obviously been rescheduled for now, and it's like, oh yeah, I had forgotten. Thanks for reminding me. Got the date wrong.
I have been known to turn up on the wrong night, so it's always good to get those reminders.
I've done that by exactly a year.
Oh no.
But then it's fine. You got the night off. Go and watch a film. Do something else. Right. So yeah, John, who are you?
Hi, my name is John Loftus. I live in Limerick in Ireland, and you can find me on 8radio.com. I also write on goldenpleck.com, writing about music and movies. I also host the STEM Inspirations podcast.
And tell us about the STEM Inspirations. Are you acknowledge the fact we need more teachers in the STEM realms?
Well, it's encouraging the next generation, really. So the STEM Inspiration podcast has grown out of a competition called the BT Young Scientist and Technology Exhibition, which is about to celebrate its 60th year. And that's all about encouraging the next generation of innovators and scientists across secondary schools in Ireland. The winner of the competition then goes over to Europe and competes against a whole pile of European nations, actually nations from right around the world actually in that competition. And thankfully, since Ireland has done so badly in Eurovision of late, we have now moved into the realms of science, and we were conquering Europe in that regard, and we've actually won the European Young Scientist competition 17 times. It's a great way to encourage youth to look at the problems of the world and put their minds to it. And the week in January at the RDS in Dublin is inspiration and the future. I don't know whether Nicola can see it in her crystal ball, but the future is in safe hands based on what we see every January, that's for sure.
It's also the best event ever. I absolutely love going to it because it's in January, it's dark, you've just had Christmas, you're miserable. You go and you just get this flood of incredible young people coming up with the most amazing ideas. So I love it.
Well, We're here talking about films. Science is good. Science is important. Science is vital. But so are films. And we're here talking about RRR, which is your choice, John. Can you tell us, first of all, why you chose it, and then get the timer up, in which you'll have 60 seconds to give the synopsis?
Yeah, why did I pick it? That is a really interesting question, because when I'm going through Netflix of late after listening to your podcast, it's always been kind of in the back of my mind, that would be a great one to do, or that would be a great one to do, etc. And obviously some of my favourites, likes of, I know you haven't done The Hateful Eight, it's the only Tarantino you haven't done, and I love Tarantino.
Kill Bill Volume 2 as well. We haven't done that.
Event Horizon, I'm not sure whether you've done her Event Horizon, because that's been in and out very quickly
we
as
haven't,
well.
no, sadly, but it's out there for the pickings. Please do pick it.
Exactly. So all of these things would have been obvious picks, but for some reason, RR came into my head, and it was going, yeah, even though it's the most successful Indian movie, it's got loads of accolades, I don't think enough people have seen it. I saw it once and I loved it. I remember myself and Nicola have talked about it loads of times ourselves. And I said, you know what, it would be a great opportunity just to give it a little bit more love and maybe encourage more people to watch it, and actually encourage myself to watch it again.
Fair play. So here is the timer, and it starts now for your synopsis.
Right. Mali is a young girl from a forest tribe, and she's kidnapped by the provincial governor and his wife. Bheem, the protector of the tribe, travels to Delhi to rescue her. Meanwhile, Ram is an Indian policeman in the British forces on a mission to be promoted to the rank of special officer. The two bond after an audacious bridge rescue, and they become deep, deep friends. But eventually they realise they're at cross purposes, or are they? After a whipping, imprisonments, and a song and a dance, the heroes realise they are both fighting the same enemy, which leads to an explosive conclusion.
One of the words you said there, I think, encapsulates pretty much the whole film. The whole 3 hours, 20-odd-ish minutes running time, and that is audacious.
It's certainly
That, definitely.
That bridge scene where they don't even speak to each other, just kind of nod.
Yeah.
And like signal to each other, and they know exactly what they're going to do. Like, I'm going to jump across the rope at the same time. You're on the bike, I'm on the horse. We're going to jump off at the same time, so we're equally balanced with this flag. I'll dip the flag in the water, hand it to you, so you're protected by the fire, and then we're going to save this kid, throw him into the dry land, and at the end we'll hold hands and grasp each other. So we're not. I was like, why not? Why?
Obvious.
Why
really.
the hell not? So, Johnny said you've spoken to Nicola on this. What you said? Did you enjoy it, Nicola?
I did.
Were you looking forward to this second watch? This repeat watch?
I actually saw this at the cinema.
Oh wow!
You're lucky.
I am very much a cinema fan, and I missed it first time round actually, and it came back. So, and I'd had a few people say you should see this. So I had the best time. People were high-fiving each other and dancing in the aisles, and it had an intermission, which I think should be a thing.
No.
I mean, no, it was brilliant. And actually, in the Netflix version, there's an intermission as well. But I mean, we're getting so many movies these days that are, I mean, this is 3 hours 7, but, you know, John Wick was 2 hours 49.
That was too long.
Babylon was
Batman,
too
2 hours 56. Beau is Afraid coming soon, 2 hours 59. Avengers Endgame, 3 hours 1. And to beat it all, coming soon, Killers of the Flower Moon, allegedly 3 hours 26. I mean, I have an old lady bladder, so I usually have to kind of dehydrate if I know that I'm not going to have an interval. And we have them in theatre, so why don't we have them in cinema? I'm campaigning at the moment for more intervals.
But it just makes the whole experience like 20 minutes longer than it needs to be.
Yeah, and the cinemas always say, well, we need to schedule more films. But if you've got a 3 hour film, having a 10-minute break is not going to give you enough of a gap to basically put another 3 hour film on. So I enjoyed the interval as well, which I kind of did have on my rewatch, because as I said to John, I started watching it. I'd had a late night the night before, and I started to be a bit sleepy. And I thought, no, I want to really, not because I was bored, but I just need a break. So actually I turned it off, went to bed, and then watched the rest of it the next night, which was lovely, actually, that they intentionally put a break in it. More films should do that. But yes, I loved it.
So, Helen, this is our second film from the Indian subcontinent. One being an earlier one being Eager Maki, also an exemplarily long running length. You weren't that big a fan of that. How does this rank compared to that?
this was better. I feel as though that I'm probably going to be a little bit more lukewarm compared to everyone else here. And I was really looking forward to seeing it. Netflix said to me it was 93% match for me. And I looked at watching it probably over like the Christmas period, or maybe again when it won the Oscar. And I saw 3 hours. No, I really struggled to get the enthusiasm, but I'm really glad that I have watched it. I think I struggled a little bit with its mix of being extremely earnest and then being extremely over the top. And maybe this just isn't quite like my genre. Like the Indian cinema that I've seen and enjoyed is very, very different to this. So yeah, I'm looking forward to what everyone's going to be saying. There's bits that I liked, and there's a what do you call it? Like a double shoulder sitting on gun finale thing, which... So it's just I don't know how you describe it. They're sitting on each shoulders and firing guns through the air, which was ridiculous and hilarious, but there's lots of other stuff I wasn't that into. So yeah, I'm going to enjoy what you're saying. I know a lot of people like really, 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 really have loved this and have taken it to their hearts. You know, I'm happy it exists, but I struggled a little bit with it.
It's one of those ones I didn't know it existed, but then more and more reviews popped up, more and more podcasters started talking about it. It's like, guys, you've got to have seen this. And then when it was on Netflix, I was like, it sounds like a film you want to see in the cinema. And I just wasn't ever in a place at the time to watch it at the cinema when it came out. So when you suggested it, John, I thought, well, fantastic. There's a reason for me to watch it here and now on Netflix and as soon as possible. And this gives me an opportunity to revisit a lot of those episodes of podcasts as well, where people did do like a deep down review on it. So I've already loaded some of those up to listen over the next coming days once I've gone through my Succession recap podcasts. I mean, at the top end, audacious is, putting it mild, this is borrowing a lot from the audacious nonsense that the Fast series has become almost. These people are superheroes essentially, but in anything but actual name, right? And it's these two people specifically, Bheem and Ram. No real explanation for why, apart from Bheem is the village protector, so he's got to be super skilled, and Ram is just really super earnest and wants to prove himself in a myriad of different ways. So they both have superpowers. I'm fine, love it. The setup is a bit weird. It seems a bit like have you guys seen The Grey Man, which is a film that we reviewed on here? So the setup seemed kind of similar in that there's two people who aren't really connected suddenly have mad beef against each other. Apart from then in this they become friends. And that was kind of the setup for it for me. What I really appreciated was just the nonsense.
Yeah.
And some of my favourite shots in cinema history was like when they were charging, I don't know, the palace, I don't know what it's called, the embassy, with a rickety 3-story stacked truck. And then the guy pulls like a handbrake turn. Then Bheem jumps out of it with 2 flaming torches, just like a foot ahead of a whole zoo of like angry animals ranging from like elk to tigers. And I was just like, where is this going? And I can understand if you're not into that, they might completely put you off those kind of things. But if you're just if you're in the frame of mind and just think, I could imagine high-fiving people when that came on the screen. I can imagine high-fiving people at loads of different areas. I can imagine high-fiving people at the bridge scene, for example.
Actually, Naatu Naatu was probably the most active everybody was.
So Naatu Naatu is the
Oscar-winning song. Yeah.
What song was it? I didn't actually know which one it was.
It's the one involving the mass dance-off, yeah.
I thought it might be.
And they did it at the Oscars as well, which when they got nominated, I was kind of, they're going to do it. And they obviously didn't do it with the 2 stars because the 2 stars are basically the Tom Cruise and Leonardo DiCaprio of Indian cinema. So they're not going to get them to do it, but they got a dance troupe to do it. But it was spectacular, even on stage. But yeah, that number is, I think it's about 4 minutes. 4.5 minutes long for a start, and is incredibly well done. But then Indian cinema does tend to do dance routines very well, which is somewhat one of the curiosities about Indian cinema, isn't it? That you do get in what is to Helen's point, quite serious films sometimes. Sometimes just break into song and dance for no particular reason. And indeed, I think the particularly funny one here is obviously the whipping scene, where it's very obvious that one should actually have a song during that one. Although it works, it just works. It's a very rousing song, and the audience, both in the cinema and actually on screen, respond to it. So it kind of works, but I'm not sure. I mean, Top Gun would probably be the American equivalent of this in terms of sort of bravado and nationalism. I can't imagine Tom Cruise doing a song and dance number, in between launching fighter jets.
He's spending too much time running. He's running too much.
Has he not done one, Rock of Ages?
Yeah, true, actually, yeah. What character did he play in Rock of Ages? Stacey Jacks, is it?
Yeah.
I've not seen the film. I don't know where I pulled that from out of my arse. That's insane.
I've not seen it either. I'm not surprised that you love the nonsense. I was watching it, I was going, I reckon Kobe's going to love this.
I wish I had seen it in the cinema with people. If this would definitely be, I'd go to Prince Charles if I had time to watch it, because I know there'd be other people into this.
Likewise, I missed it in the cinema.
Ram and Bheem's introductions are probably two of the best introductions in cinema. I mean, the special effects in terms of like the animals, you could tell that obviously they're super CGI'd, but it just kind of didn't matter in any way, shape or form. It's just like, yeah, that's obviously not a tiger scratching at Bheem as he's holding it back by the strength of his own awesomeness.
I did love the fact that right up front, I think it's the first thing you see on screen is no animals were harmed during this. They were all CG. And then they list all of the CG animals. It's kind of, there's a lot of them.
I completely missed that. Vibe.
I missed that too. But for a 3-hour plus movie, it rocks along. I mean, it just goes from set piece to set piece, dance to song. We've spoken about another movie recently, which was a third of the length, but definitely felt twice as long. But it's just brilliant. All the action, as you said, that introduction, and it just kind of sets it out wonderfully, because you have the story, you have the heroes. And what I loved actually when we're talking about the music is the way they use some of the songs almost like a Greek chorus to kind of link one kind of chapter to the next chapter. I thought that worked really well. But yeah, that bridge rescue, it was just, I remember seeing the trailer of that and I said, that's a film I really need to see. But like everything else was brilliant. That attack with the animals was just mind-blowing, really. And but then it still landed emotionally for me as well. And I mean, as the story goes on and reveal, like, because Bheem's mission is pretty straightforward. You know what he's after. He wants to rescue the sister from the clutches of the horrible governor and his wife, Alison Doody, playing an absolute heel of a lady.
And Ray Stevenson literally twirling his moustache. I mean...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Alison Doody has back, between Nazis now and bad colonials.
Where does she play Nazi?
In The Last Crusade, Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade. She's Elsa.
Holy shit.
She's Elsa, yeah. Yeah.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah, and actually Ray Stevenson is turning up in Ahsoka as one of the Inquisitors as well. So he, in terms of evil Empire types, he's well able to play those as well. Yeah. Fantastic.
I want to just talk about the serious side, and this is maybe where Helen enjoyed the film a bit more or took more from it. There's so dark a story. This child gets kidnapped for what I assume is very, very little money. Then that propagates the attack with the guys in India against the British colony. I really enjoyed that kind of head-to-head, the kind of storyline about the local, the rebellion against the empire side of things, which is what a lot kind of drives things like Star Wars. The British guys were evil, like I say, moustache twirling evil, and that was funny, and that was interesting. Through to that, just throwing the spiky whip at Ram to use on Bheem, which is a really horrible idea. It's like, he's not bleeding enough, you're not hurt enough. Get these inside and let's rip his skin off. And I feel that's a lot of that must have been based in reality that I don't really want to know about because it's too bleak to show. So it's in a film like this, it's interesting. It brings that to the foreground and it tells it in a way that people do understand and be like, oh shit, this stuff did happen. Partition did happen and lots of people were really displaced by what happened when the colonies invaded these different places where they potentially should have been hanging out. So yeah, Helen, is there anything on that side of the story that engaged you at all, or is it?
I feel that it was just a little bit because like the whipping scene is horrific, but then it's also played very comic booky and like, you know, he's fine afterwards. So it's a bit like, oh, it can't have been that bad. So there's a little bit of like, if it had been slightly a bit more in reality, then it might have had a bit more of an impact.
But then we wouldn't have had jumping off a burning truck with hundreds of animals at the same time. So I feel...
Yeah, and it's kind of the setting and like the start of the film and basically just stealing children is really upsetting. And then we have kind of like the other backstory where this like little kid sees his dad shot to death and his mother or his auntie and his other children in the village. They're really kind of hard-hitting moments, and then there's just loads of silliness, and I'm just a bit like, I don't know what I'm meant to be feeling. Am I meant to be feeling as if this is something like marking history and something that should kind of shock me? Or am I meant to be like, hey, it's funny, it's a CGI tiger, which I struggle a little bit. And I also like, this is probably like just a genre thing, but the romance between the English woman and the...
Yeah, and Bheem came up almost out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm just a bit like, that they could have got rid of that, and maybe it would have been, because it is essentially, it's a bromance. It's about the love the two guys have for each other, and obviously they can't make it about that, so they have to kind of like shoehorn the film in. But the genuine bromance and the bond that they have, and the inner conflict that they have when they find out that they're fighting against each other, is the more interesting parts for me.
But love conquers all.
And it's just a bit like, oh, this bit feels... some bits were just a bit too silly for me, and I'm not as big into the nonsense as you are. So, yeah, I just struggled a little bit with it, which I think that's me more than... because everyone else has gone, hey, it's fine. I don't care about the shifting moods from shot children to flying tigers and things. It's fine. I'm like, what? I can't deal with it.
I think because the bad guys are so pantomime-y bad, had they been like 12 Years a Slave kind of bad guys where they were like really po-faced and serious set against the Naatu Naatu dancing, I don't think that would have worked at all. But
12 Years a Slave would not work with a dance number at all, I think.
Exactly, yeah. But because I can't remember the bad lady's name, because she was so ridiculously like OTT, and the guy, when he didn't know how to work his motorbike and then went ballistic at Bheem, and now just being like a proper... So is that kind of like they're being so...
He beats him horrifically for that. I'm just like, what?
Yeah. But you know it's OT, it's like crazy over the top, and it's with that intonation. I feel that it makes it easier, and it makes it easier for us to be behind Bheem and Ram when they're like rising up against everyone. You're like, yeah, get them, you fuckers.
Yeah, absolutely. It is based on like the Bheem and Ram. They are based on actual revolutionaries from India in the 1920s. Now, they never met, and they obviously didn't go through what is witnessed on screen. But so it's a fictionalized version from the director. So, and he's actually stated that he was inspired by the likes of Inglourious Bastards and the likes of Motorcycle Diaries, just in terms of that hero's journey to free a nation from Shara bastards, which was what they were suffering under the boot of. So it is that heightened mythology, really, of the Indian struggle towards independence.
There's also, with a lot of Indian movies, there's always mythology somewhere in there. So obviously Rama was in the Ramayana, is a god, and Bhima in the I'm terrible at Indian pronunciation, so anyone Indian listening, I apologise, but the Mahabharata, that's got, obviously those two names have a kind of mythological aspect to it, which actually I did have an argument as to whether this is kind of a superhero movie. It is two gods, effectively. Obviously, they aren't, and they never were in reality. But it is a really weird one because, again, superhero movies don't usually have song and dance numbers or indeed whipping scenes necessarily in them. So it is a weird balance. And I must confess, on the second watch, I think I was more aware of some of that brutality. Whereas when I was in the cinema, I was kind of drunk on the everyone enjoying themselves around them. And I think the second watching, I was kind of, oh, actually, this is quite nasty. And actually it was a lot bloodier than I remember as well. But obviously, you know, after those savage beatings, they're jumping up and down, and which kind of points towards that sort of more Marvel thing, because those guys get a beating as well, but they always stand up and they're fine about 2 minutes later. So it's that kind of, it is a weird mixture. And I must confess, I did notice that more the second time around.
Did you, I mean, let's talk about the violence side of things, because it was a lot bloodier than I expected it to be. I've watched a handful of Indian-based films, so I was kind of expecting them not to be so. What do you guys think about the bullet holes and flying blood? And
I didn't think it was a gore fest. It was strong in places, all right, but I thought the whipping scene was probably the worst of it, to be quite honest. And it was cartoonish, you know, so, you know, I don't think it definitely didn't get to Tarantino levels for the most part. And, you know, I think probably it did lean a little bit on the silly side, but I think it probably got a little bit sillier as it went on. I do think that last action scene when they're one is on the other's shoulders and they're jumping out of buildings and doing all sorts of somersaults, that just stretched credibility just even more than the film it could get away with. But
is that the bit you thought is not realistic?
That's the only place. It was the only place really now. But what they carry, well, the two leads, MT Raman Rao Jr. and Ram Charan, they're mesmeric. They are the Leo and Tom Cruise. They're like, they would set your heart aflutter if you were so inclined. But
and also, that's the reason why it's called RRR, apparently, although it says it's Rise, Roar, Revolt in English. Actually, in Telugu, it doesn't mean that at all. It's simply Rajamouli, Ram and Rama.
So Rajamouli being the director.
The director and the two stars. They are so, I mean, as I said, those three, I mean, basically, Rajamouli, I believe, has something like the top 3 grossing Indian films of all time. So he's like the James Cameron of India, and has come together with these two who actually don't normally appear together because they're so big stars. They don't normally appear in the same film. And I think they'd insisted that they had approximately the same screen time as well. But
so almost like the Towering Inferno type thing, where they had to have the... Yeah.
And I think it's quite interesting that if it was remade, which I hope it never is, but it would have to be something like CCC, because it would have to be Cameron, Cruise, and I don't know, Chris Hemsworth or someone like that.
Chris.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of C's. Maybe Chris Nolan. I don't know, but I can't imagine Chris Nolan's version of RRR. But
we are getting a sequel, which is the great news.
Yes, I heard that. Yeah, that's weird. But
there's a sequel to this, is there?
Yes.
Sorry, Helen, you're going to talk about the violence, you're saying?
So I was just having a quick look to see if I could find out what the certificate was. I didn't note it down. And
15 on Netflix.
So when you get your Google suggestions, the top one is RRR good for kids? I would probably say no.
No, I would say no.
Just if you're thinking like popping it on for your 8-year-old, maybe not. I don't know. Kobe, what age would you let your son watch it?
I did watch a bit of this in Marlon because he's ill, and I did watch in a few sittings. So 20 minutes when he was kind of a bit out of it, I put it on, and he's not at an age where he knows what's going on. He doesn't know why, jumping out of a wooden truck with flaming tigers doesn't make any sense. Although he may have therapy to deal with that later on in life. But yeah, I wouldn't show this to anyone below the age of like 10. Although had I seen this at 10, I would have loved it as well, because I saw like RoboCop when I was 7. Yeah,
there's actually a thread doing the rounds on Twitter at the moment. What are the films that you watched as a child that wasn't a children's movie? So there's some very, very interesting answers to that. My one was The Good, the Bad and the Ugly.
Alien was mine. It's damaged me for life. Not a film to show where I think I was 8.
I saw RoboCop at 7 or 8.
I mean, I saw them all.
Yeah.
I wish I'd seen RoboCop then.
Is there anything else you guys want to say before we head to the scores? Okay, well, let's head to the scores.
I'm Sam Clements, host of the 90 Minutes or Less Film Festival, another podcast in the Stripped Media family, a podcast that celebrates movies under 90 minutes long. Each episode, I'm joined by a special guest who selects a movie to join our prestigious lineup. Past guests have included fellow Stripped Media family members Martin and Sam from Song by Song, and Kobe from Flixwatcher, and Dave from The Wire Stripped. Search for us now on the app you're currently listening to this podcast, or join us at 90minfilmfest.com.
So welcome to the Flixwatcher scores. The scores are out of 5. You can have decimal places if you wish. And we will start with you, please, John, with your recommendability.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 3-hour Indian film with very over-the-top action and dance numbers. So I have to tread carefully here. So I'm going to give it a 3.49.
Oh, okay. Nicola?
I'm going to go for around 4, I think, in terms of recommendability. Again, just to mention our third musketeer, Heather Wells, who John and I basically talk movies to. She made me laugh a lot after we both recommended it to her, and she WhatsApped us and went, it was about after an hour, wasn't it, John? And she just went, is it like this all the way through?
Well, basically, if she could come on this podcast, she was just going to come on and go, it's rubbish. I give it a 1 for every category, so.
3, you score 4, Helen.
It's a tricky one to recommend because I think to recommend it to people who are kind of like in for the all action nonsense and your Fast and Furious crew may struggle with the songs and the quite erratic subtitling as well, and the kind of length and the sort of incredibly earnest style. And then the people who are generally kind of like up for musicals and enjoy a bit of a song and dance would perhaps be put off by the OTT violence. And it's a tricky-ish one to recommend. We know you might have a good time with it if you've got this far to the podcast and you haven't seen it and you're still thinking what to do. So I'm going to give it a 3. I'm really glad that I've watched it. It was a weird experience, but thank you.
I'm going to go for a 4. And I think this is one where I think, like I say, as Helen rightly says, it's difficult to gauge what spectrum, what kind of people to recommend it to, because it's all things and nothing at the same time in terms of genres. But I think it's one of those things where I would push and say, look, have a go. If you don't like it within 15 minutes, like, tap out, because it's something that might surprise you. And in that first 15 minutes, you got Ram besting, 1,000 people outside the barracks, and also Bheem going toe-to-toe with a wolf and then a tiger. And if you don't like it at that point, if you're not interested at that point, then fine, just leave the film. But because it's got so many different angles to it, I have no idea who would definitely take against it or who definitely would love it. So I think have a go, try it. Repeat viewing score, John.
I'm going to go for a 4. This was my second time watching it, and I was still wrapped with it. I think you get more every time you watch it. And, I think it's one of those ones you could chuck on and even just kind of half watch, those sort of films, that because it's just the set pieces are so strong. And we hadn't mentioned those open action sequences till now. And there's actually just so many different set pieces in there. You're going, if you were passing the television and the bridge scene is on, you're sitting down and you're watching the bridge scene. You might just, you might go about your business then after that, but you're wrapped in there for that kind of 10-minute piece or whatever.
So what was that score, sorry? 4. One thing I meant to ask in the main part, what language do you watch this on?
Hindi.
You watched it in Hindi with English subtitles?
Yeah, and unfortunately they didn't release it on Netflix in its native Telugu, or Telugu.
I saw it. Yeah. I saw it in Telugu in the cinema and then Hindi. I don't know why I watched it in Hindi, but I felt that I think it's the same actors doing the voiceover in Hindi as Telugu, but I didn't like the English dub.
No, I would never watch a dub.
Did you notice any difference between the Hindi and the Telugu?
It was all Indian to me, to be honest. So no,
because that's one thing I've heard a few times, almost apologetically. Is like, it's not the original version; it's Hindi. I'm like, I don't know enough to know the difference. But it does surprise me that why not just have the original soundtrack?
Exactly, it doesn't make any sense.
It's a copyright issue. I understand because I did look it up, but I don't know why they haven't got it in the original language.
So repeat viewing score, Nicola.
I think, well, I think the second time I watched it, I did enjoy it, but I did spot some of the flaws and maybe some of the shonky bits, and I noticed the blood a lot more, but I still really enjoyed it. So I think 3.5 for me.
Helen?
I don't know. I don't think I'm going to go back to this. I can't really think of that many 3-hour plus films that I have watched loads anyway. 1.5.
Yeah, I'm not going to watch as much. I do definitely want to see it in a rep cinema like the Prince Charles. I think that'll be the key time for me to go back and watch it. I would have loved to go in there not knowing what the film is, not expecting everything, and just walking away saying, I don't know what's happened, but it's been insane for the last 3 hours.
That was me. That was exactly what my experience was.
So, repeat viewing score 2.5. Small screen score, John?
I'm going to go with 4 only because I've only seen it on the small screen and it's still been brilliant. Now, I'm sure seeing it on the big screen as you did, Nicola, it was amazing, but, you know, it still looks great on the television. So I'll go with 4.
Nicola?
Yeah, I did see it on the big screen. It's the most gorgeous, sumptuous looking film. And I think it really isn't a film you should see on the small screen for a number of reasons, not just the fact that it's gorgeous and sumptuous, but that atmosphere. It's one of those films, I think there are certain films that really do need to be seen in the cinema. A Quiet Place would be another one that I always give as an example, because everyone really does have to suck their popcorn for an hour. Exactly, because, you know, you really do not, I mean, that was probably the quietest I've ever been in a cinema, and no one made any noises. And this was almost the opposite. People were rioting. And I also don't have the biggest screen in my house either, or the best sound system. So I'm going to give it a 1 for small screen.
Wow. Helen?
I don't know if this makes me sound like I'm 80 years old, but the thought of going to the cinema and have people high-fiving in the aisles and screaming and shouting and jumping around, it's not for me. I like an atmosphere and I'm happy for people kind of cheering, and if it's a horror, screaming and jumping and yelping. But I feel if I went to see this at the cinema, I'd have quite a bad experience watching it if people were doing that. So I've heard people getting up and doing the dance, that unless it was a specific, this is a sing-along screening, I would find that a bit much.
Sing-along, that has to happen.
I'm pretty sure the Prince Charles would do something. I would find that not the experience that I want. And I don't know how well the CGI animals would kind of hold up on the big screen. So I think with this film, obviously it was made with the intention to see it with that kind of audience. So I think there should be some, you know, that's how it should be seen. So if you can do that. But for me, it was like fine at home. I don't want the experience. So I'm going to give it a 4. I think it was good. It's obviously made for some bigger things. So that's why I'm dropping at a point. But I'm happy watching it at home on my own.
I'm going to go for quite low one. I'm going to go for 2.2. I would definitely love to see this in the cinema as discussed. And I think I would have really enjoyed that collective experience as well. I do, if it's well placed and within the context of the film, you know, get people enjoying it in whatever way they want to, as long as it's not kind of distracting for you enjoying the film as well. And I think this seems like a proper party vibe kind of thing, in a similar way to when I've seen Secret Cinema and people getting more involved into the screening than you would do in a traditional cinema. So I would say it's almost like Secret Cinema rules when you watch this in the cinema. Engagement score, John?
I'm going to go with a 4.5 for a number of reasons. Watching it the second time, I was worried going into it whether I would be as rapt and as engaged as I was first time around. And I certainly was. So I was delighted with that. And as I've said all the way through, it just keeps momentum going all the time. Like it just doesn't let up all the way through. And so moving from chapter, it just keeps you on your toes. And of course, there's the reveal about Ram through 2/3 of the way through as well. So that gives it just another level then again, which is fantastic. And then, and something I actually meant to bring up earlier was, you know, the nature of it is a subtitle film. You actually have to stay engaged. And I think I certainly like watching international films. And I think it does get you away from the bad habits of looking at your phone, which we've all fallen into in some shape or form. If you're watching a movie at home, I'm definitely guilty of that. And I love when I watch a film with subtitles, whatever country it's from, you have to stay locked in because, if you start looking at your phone, you're going to be lost. Yeah, so for that reason, and I would encourage more listeners to check out international cinema because some brilliant movies out there that if you're afraid of that inch of words at the bottom of your screen, you're missing out.
Direct to bong.
Exactly. So 4.5.
Nicola, engagement score.
So, as I said, I was engaged. I did have to take a break. I didn't watch it all the way through. I did not do all the 3 hours. So, but as I said, I think there's almost a permission to do that. It wasn't because I wasn't engaged at all. I was never bored. And those set sequences are just, they're replayable at any point, really. So, and I also agree with John that you kind of almost have to pay attention to subtitled movies. And I too appreciate that, again, particularly if I'm watching them at home, because there are too many distractions otherwise. So I think I'm going to go with the 3.5.
Fair play. Helen.
So I just watched on what version Netflix presented, which I assume was the dubbed one, but then it was subtitled anyway. So it was quite a chaotic experience because not really much matched up, which is obviously something you have to keep your eye on. I think very much, it's a very up and down. There's kind of the big set pieces, and then there's the weird romance, and then there's a bit too much kind of talky, and then there's another big set piece, and then I'm like, how long is it going to go? And then it's there's a twist in it, and then it's down again and up again. So I think overall it comes out as a 3 for me for engagement.
I also did the English dub with the English subtitles and laughing at the differences sometimes. But it generally does happen because someone's written the script and someone's written the script and someone's written the subtitles based on the original soundtrack. So, but it is funny sometimes seeing the difference. I think I felt it was a bit too long. I thought there's maybe trimmed down on some of the sequences. I'm not sure which one specifically, but if they could get to 2 hours and 30 with this, still telling the same story, I think we could have a really super engaging film overall.
I was going to say all of those slow motion sequences, given that there were quite a lot of them, I think probably elongated the movie by about 30 minutes, probably.
More real time.
That last act is probably a little stretched.
Yeah. So it was are we there yet, guys? So 3.8. That gives us an overall score of 3.24938. I thought it was going to be higher than that, but there we go. That's the way the Flixwatcher dice fall.
You giving your low scores for your small screen?
I'm sorry.
I thought it was me bringing it down, but it was you guys giving it 1s and 2s for the small screen.
Yeah, Helen's score was only 0.13 different to Nicola's, but it's things like the small screen score which overall just drag it down and repeat being a score. But yeah, that's how it works here in this podcast.
Strange scores. The scores don't lie.
So we had a great experience sharing about this movie, so that's the main thing.
Absolutely.
It is a recommendation, generally.
It is a recommendation, yeah. Can you sign off, guys, by telling all the listeners where we can find you and say goodbye to them?
Well, you can find me pretty much anywhere, to be perfectly honest. So on Twitter, I am at Doc Nicola, where you'll find me not just talking about movies, but also worky stuff as well. So you'll get a bit of a mixture. I'm also on LinkedIn, more worky stuff than movies, to be honest. If you Google me, you'll find all sorts of weird and wonderful things that I've done as well. Mostly worky, but some other stuff as well. But so yeah, you can find me anywhere.
You can find me at Lofty SNDS on Twitter. Tune into at Radio Ireland as well, 8radio.com, that is, for great indie sounds. And she can watch and read my reviews of music and movies on goldplick.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us. And thank you very much, John, for picking RRR for us to talk about.
Thank you guys for having us.
It's been fun.
Thanks for coming on.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes and Rockwood Audio's editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.